Hello, thank you for visiting this training video hosted by Gainwell Technologies. Today, I'm going to show you how to enroll a new atypical provider in the Provider Management module for Vermont Medicaid. Before we begin, please note that this video is intended for informational purposes only and does not guarantee approval of your enrollment in Vermont Medicaid. If you have questions regarding Vermont Medicaid's enrollment criteria, please contact the Provider Services Help Desk at 802-878-7871 or email us at vtproviderenrollment@dxc.com. For today's training, I'm going to start on the homepage of the Provider Management module. You can access the link to the module by visiting www.vtmedicaid.com and click on the Enrollment tab. To start a new enrollment, I'm first going to click on the menu button that's located on the top left-hand side of the screen. Under that, I'm going to hover over Provider Enrollment, and I'm going to click on New Enrollment. The first thing you're going to see is our welcome page. This welcome page is designed to give you some more information on what you may need in order to complete your application. There is an enrollment pre-checklist available, however not required, but if you wanted to fill out your enrollment type, your provider type, and specialty, and hit Generate Pre-Checklist, it will give you some more specific information on what you may need for documentation as you go through the application. When you're ready to start, you can click on the Start button on the right-hand side of the screen. The first thing we're going to do is we are going to register our application. Every application that you complete within the Provider Management module must be registered in order to obtain an application tracking number, or an ATN. This ATN will allow you to resume your application if you have to leave and come back and finish it later, or it will also allow you to check your enrollment status once you have submitted your application. So you are required to fill out an email address and a password. And then there is an option to provide a provider reference. This is not a required field. However, it does come in handy if you are filling out multiple applications and you want to easily see on the top of every page of the application to remind you which provider you are currently working on. Once you fill out the information, you can click the Register button. This has now launched us into a brand new application. You're going to see in the blue box that provides you with your application tracking number, and it will also send you an email address to the email that you provided during the registration with this tracking number. So you don't necessarily need to write it down or keep it handy. It will be with you throughout the application and again in your email. A couple things to note before we get started today. The application tracking number is located at the top of every page, and under that is going to be that provider reference. So if you entered a provider reference, it will be located here at the top of the page. If you didn't enter a reference, it will just be blank. If you need help on a specific page that you are working on, there is page level help available, and it's indicated here with a blue question mark. If you click on that question mark, it's going to give you some more information on the page that you're currently working on. There's also field level help available. That's indicated by a gray question mark located directly above the field. If you hover over that gray question mark, a bubble will appear which will provide more information on that specific field. Anything with a blue asterisk is required, so you will need to fill out all of those fields before you can continue on to the next page. So to start, we're first going to select our enrollment type by choosing from the drop-down list. And as noted, today we are selecting an atypical provider type. And just as a reminder, an atypical provider is defined as a provider who cannot have an NPI. So if you have an NPI associated to your facility group or provider, you would not want to complete an atypical provider application. It is just for those that cannot obtain an NPI. Once you select your enrollment type, it is going to give you a blue warning box letting you know that once you save and continue this first page and go on to page 2, you cannot come back and change the enrollment type. That's going to hold true for the provider type as well. And the reason for this is you may notice that once you've selected your enrollment type, a whole bunch of pages have populated here for you. The enrollment type and the provider type that you choose drive the rest of the application. It's designed this way so that you don't have to weed through unnecessary information that doesn't pertain to you. So once you save and continue on to the second page, that's why you can't come back and change those two pieces of information. The rest of the application has already been tailored to those. So if you realize later on in the application that one of these pieces of information is incorrect, you would want to abandon the application and start over. So next I'm going to choose my provider type from the drop-down list. And today we are going to be in 037. And again, it's going to let you know that you can't change your provider type once you save and continue on to the next page. And also, I have selected a moderate risk provider type here. So it's letting me know that I may be subject to additional screening requirements. Limited risk, you may not have exactly the same information that I'm going to have today. You may not be subject to the same screening requirements, but moderate and high risk provider types may have some additional steps to take. Next, we need to complete our effective date, and you can request an effective date for your enrollment up to 1 year in the past or up to 90 days in the future. Below that, we need to enter in our provider information, and we need to select whether we are an individual or whether we are a business. So you have the option to toggle between the two. Today, I'm going to be an individual. So I'm going to need to enter in my last name and my first name. Gender and ethnicity are not required fields, but you can enter those in if you choose to. I need to enter in my birth date and a social security number. And again, if you chose business here instead of individual, you're going to have a few different fields, including your legal name and your tax ID. So it just depends on which one you chose here. Under that, we're going to ask you a few questions. The first question here says, are you currently enrolled as a provider? If I choose yes, a red warning box is going to populate asking me if I'm actually trying to revalidate. The system is saying, okay, if you already are an enrolled provider with Vermont Medicaid, why are you submitting a new enrollment application? And are you trying to revalidate? Because if you are, this is not the correct avenue to do so. If I was to select yes, that I am trying to revalidate, it's going to leave the application, bring me back to the home page to start the revalidation process. There are a couple reasons why a currently enrolled provider would start a new enrollment, such as adding a service location to an existing record. So there are cases when you would select no here and still choose that you're currently enrolled as a provider. If that's the case, you're going to enter in your current Medicaid provider ID in the box to the right. I'm going to change that back to no, that we are starting over as brand new. We're also going to ask you if you were previously enrolled as a provider. If you choose yes here, you will be required to enter in the identifier with Vermont Medicaid from the previous enrollment that you had. And lastly, we're going to ask you if you're Medicare enrolled. I am going to choose yes today. You'll notice that nothing populates to the right, but later on in the application, because I chose yes, I will be required to enter in my Medicare information. Lastly, on this page, we are going to need to fill out contact information. And there's going to be several places throughout the application that we are going to ask for contact information, and each one has a different purpose. This contact information on the first page is for the application itself. So who do we send notifications to? Where do we send notifications for this application only? So you'll want to enter in a name and a contact address. And then you'll notice that once I tab through the zip code, it's going to run that address through the USPS software to validate. You're going to come up with another window with a suggested change here. It looks like it added the last 4 digits to my zip code. So I'm going to accept those changes by simply clicking on the line item here. However, if for some reason you did not want to accept the changes, you can hit the X in the window and it will keep what you have currently typed. Under that, you need to select a phone type and then provide a phone number. And then below that, you'll notice that email address is not asterisk. However, directly below that field is a question for your preferred communication method. You're going to choose from the drop-down box of whether you want us to send notifications via email or mail. And I'm going to highly recommend that you choose email here. The reason for this is you're going to get notifications much quicker regarding the application via email than you would with mail. And lots of times when we have to send an application back or request additional information, there is a time limit on getting that information to us. So if we have to send it by mail and print out a notice and then put that in the mail, it's going to get to you and eat up some of that time that is valuable for you to get the information back to us. So again, I am going to recommend that you do choose email here. And then you'll notice that once I choose email, now I have an asterisk on the email address. I will be required to enter that before I can move on. So we've made it to the end of the first page and I'm ready to hit save and continue. But before I do that, I just want to go back up to the top and reiterate that the enrollment type and the provider type cannot be changed once I hit save and continue and move on to the second page. So double check, make sure that you have made those entries correct. And once you are ready, you can hit save and continue to move on to page 2 of the application. The second page of the application is the specialties page. And before we move on to add a specialty, I just want to note that there is a progress bar at the top of the page that will follow you with every page. Any page that you're currently working on is going to be noted in yellow. Any page that you haven't completed yet is going to be here in blue. And then any page that you have completed that you can go back to and review or edit information is going to be white, and there'll be a hyperlink that you can click on it and it will bring you back to that page. So we do need to enter in at least one specialty associated to our provider type. You'll see my provider type listed here. So in order to do that, I'm going to hit the Create New button that's in the Specialties field. So I'll hit Create New, and that's going to bring up a new window in order for me to enter in a specialty. Now you have to have a primary specialty noted. So if you are entering only one specialty, just make sure you check the Make Primary for that specialty. If you are entering multiple specialties associated to your provider type, at least one of them has to be marked as your primary specialty. I'm going to choose from my specialty from the drop-down list here. And you'll notice that I only have 2 specialties listed, and my list may look different than your list. That's because I'm only going to see specialties that are allowed with the provider type that I chose. That's why it's so important in the beginning to make sure you're choosing the right information. If you don't see your specialty listed here, chances are you chose the wrong provider type, so you'll want to review that. So I can only choose from the specialties that are allowed with this provider type. So I'm going to go ahead and choose my specialty. And then I also need to choose a taxonomy. So again, I'm going to select from the drop-down list here, and I'm only going to see taxonomies that are allowed with the specialty that I chose. So it's all intuitive to make the correct selection in order to reduce error. And then under that, I need to enter in an effective date. And I do want to make a note here that when you are entering your effective date for your specialty, you want to make sure that if you chose on the first page to ask for an effective date of your enrollment in the past, you need your specialty effective date to go back at least that far. If you don't, you could run into claims processing errors. So just be mindful of that when you're entering that information. Once you've entered the information, you can hit the Save button. And now you will notice that I have an entry here to satisfy the requirement of a primary specialty. If you had multiple specialties to enter, you would simply repeat that process. You'd hit Create New again. It's going to bring you up a blank window and you can enter in your next specialty. Just note you can only make one of those your primary. If you have multiple taxonomies to report against a single specialty, you're going to report those taxonomies in the Additional Taxonomies field. The Specialties field will not allow me to duplicate a specialty, so I wouldn't be able to hit Create New, add another S12 with a different taxonomy. It would error out and wouldn't let me do that. If I do have an additional taxonomy to report for this specialty, I want to do it in the bottom, and I'm going to do this just like I did the specialty. I'm going to hit Create New in the Additional Taxonomies window, and then I'm going to choose my taxonomy from the drop-down list. I'm going to hit Save. And now I've reported an additional taxonomy to my specialty. When you've entered in all necessary specialty and taxonomy information, you can hit save to continue to the next page. The next page of our application is the service location page, and this is where you're going to enter in your service location information. I want to make a note here that if you are a limited risk provider type, you have the option to enter in multiple service locations if it's applicable to you. If you are a moderate or a high risk provider type, you can only enter in one service location per application, and that is because of screening requirements for a moderate or high risk provider. So if you are a moderate or high risk provider and you have multiple service locations, you would have to have multiple applications. So to start my service location, I'm going to click on the Create New button in the service location field. Just like our specialty, I have to indicate a primary service location. So if you only are entering one, you want to make sure to check the primary box at the top. Next, you're going to enter in your billing name. And I do want to make a note here that you need to enter in your billing name just like you are going to bill it on your claim. So just be mindful of that. Under that, you're going to provide contact information for the service location. So for the contact information that we provided earlier on in the application on the first page, that was for the application itself. Now we're entering in contact information for our service location. So I'll enter in the county and the country. And then again, as soon as I do that, it's going to process through the USPS software, and I'm going to accept the changes by simply clicking on the line item. Under that, email address is not required, but again, I'm going to remind you that you're going to get notifications much quicker via email than mail, so I do recommend that an email address is entered in for your service location. You are required to enter in a phone number, so we're going to do that by hitting the Create New button. And we need to select our phone type from the drop-down list, the telephone number, and then if you've got an extension, you can enter that here, but it's not required. I will hit save. And now I have an entry for the phone number for my service location. And if you have multiple phone numbers, maybe you want to enter in a fax number or a mobile number as well, just repeat the process by hitting Create New again. Under that, you are required to enter in the hours of operation. So you're going to check that box, which is going to open up a new window, and you're going to be able to give us those hours of operation. Again, same idea, you're going to hit the Create New button. That's going to bring up a new window. So you have a few different options to report your hours of operation. If you drop down the box under day, you're going to notice that you can choose for every day. So if your hours are the same every single day of the week, you have that option. If your hours vary day to day, you have the option to select a day and give us those hours. You also can choose from weekdays, if all your hours are the same during the week, and weekends. So there's multiple ways here to report your hours. It just depends on your current situation. So I'm going to choose weekdays for now, and I'm going to select that I am open, let's say from 8 a.m. until 5 p.m. And now I have my hours listed here. And again, if you are needing to report different hours for different days, you're just going to repeat the process. You're going to hit Create New again. It'll give you a blank window, and then you can continue on to report. Under that, we're going to ask you if the service location is ADA compliant, if the services location is accessible by public transport, and what are your after hours arrangements? What do you instruct your patients to do if you're not available? So for today, I'm going to write that we tell them to go to the ER. Once you've filled out all the necessary information on the page, you can hit save. And now you're going to notice that I have satisfied the requirement with an entry for my service location that is primary. And again, because I chose a moderate risk type provider, I can't hit create new again. You'll see that the create new button is grayed out. So this is going to be the same for moderate or high risk. But those of you who are limited risk provider types, you will have this available to hit create new again if you have multiple service locations to report. Once you've entered in all the necessary information, you can hit save to continue. We are now on to the addresses page of our application, and on this page you are going to be required to give us two addresses, pay to and a mail to address. So the first up is the pay to address. And you're going to notice, first of all, there is an option to copy over from your service location, from your primary service location. So if the information for your pay to contact, meaning the billing name, the contact information, and the address are all of the same as your service location, you can check this box, and what it's going to do is it's going to copy over all of that information so that you do not have to fill it out again. If the information is not the same, though, you would want to go ahead and fill out all of the information just like you did with the service location. This is going to hold true for the email address and phone number. If it's the same as the service location, you can check the box and it will fill it in for you. But if it's different, you have the option to fill out that information. As we move down to the mail to address, it is going to be the same option. So instead, though, you're going to have a drop down list because if you entered in information different for your pay to, you now have the option to copy either from your service location or your pay to information. If neither one of these is the same for your mail to, you also have the option to simply fill out the information. I'm going to go ahead and just copy over again from my service location. And then as I scroll down again for my email and phone number, I have a drop down and I'm going to copy from my service location. One thing to note here, when you do copy over, if you were to go back in the application to your service location and try to edit it, it's not going to let you. And the reason for that is because you've copied the information. So if for some reason you need to go back after copying information and edit your service location, you would want to just come back to this page first and remove the copy by hitting select value, which will take it away, and then you'll have the option to go back and edit your service location information. Also, I want to note here that I copied over my service location information and it did populate my email and my phone number, but it defaulted my preferred communication for mailing to mail. So it's going to default you to mail. So just be mindful of that because anytime in here that I can, I'm going to recommend that you choose email as your preferred communication in order to get notifications fast and efficiently. Below that, you're going to have an option to enter in contact and address information related to prior authorization, remittance, legal, or medical records request. These are not required, which is why they are collapsed. But if you need to enter in specific information in any of these categories, you can expand the selection by clicking on the plus sign on the right-hand side of the line item. That will expand the entry, and you have the option to enter in the information. Now, although nothing is asterisk in here as required, if you fill out part of this, you have to complete it. Otherwise, it will not save and let you continue. I wouldn't be able to just put a name in here and leave the address blank. If I tried to save that, it's going to error out and it's not going to let me keep going. So just be mindful of that. If you do start it, you need to complete it in any field. Once you are ready and you've entered in all of the necessary information on the addresses page, you can hit save to continue. The next page of our application is organization, and this is where you're going to be required to give us your organization type and your tax classification. So you're going to first choose from the drop-down list under organization type and choose the appropriate type. Under that, you're going to choose from the drop-down list to check your tax classification. You have the option to check any of the fields that are applicable to you. So if any of these are applicable to you, you're going to want to check the box that's associated to that field. If it's not, you can leave it blank. If you need more information about these fields, there is a hyperlink to a website that you can get more information related to Secretary of State. And I do want to note too that if you check registered with Secretary of State or incorporated, you will be required to enter in the date associated in the field to the right of those fields. Once you've entered in all necessary information, you can hit Save to continue. Next, we are on to the Credentials tab. And first up, I'm going to enter in my license information. So I'm going to hit Create New on the license field. I'm going to first enter in my license number, the state in which my license was issued, the issuing board, and my effective and end dates of my license. And I'm going to hit Save. And now I've satisfied that entry. Many times you're going to hold multiple licenses, so if that's the case, you're just going to hit Create New, and you're going to enter in your next license. Under that is a field for Medicare participation, and because I chose earlier on in the application that I am Medicare enrolled, I am required to enter in this information before I can continue. So I'm going to hit Create New in the Medicare participation window. I do want to be considered for Medicare crossover claims, so I'm going to check that box. I'm going to enter in my Medicare number. And I need to select my Medicare type that I'm enrolled in by using the drop-down list. Now, many times you're going to be enrolled in more than one of these types, maybe Medicare Part A and Part B. So you're just going to have an entry in for each one that you are enrolled in. So I'm entering for both. I'm going to check Medicare Part A first. I'm going to give my effective and end dates for my Medicare enrollment. And I'm going to hit Save. And then I'm going to repeat the process by hitting Create New again in the Medicare participation window. I want to be considered for Medicare crossover claims again. Enter in my Medicare number. And this time I'm going to select Medicare Part B. Enter in my effective and end dates. And now I have both of them listed here. The last question I have on this page is if I'm enrolled in any other state Medicaid programs. If you choose yes, a window is going to open up and you will be required to provide the information regarding that state program. The program name, the state, the effective and end dates of your enrollment. If your answer is no, you have satisfied the requirement for that question and you can move on. Once you've entered in all necessary information on this page, you can hit Save to continue. We are on to the other page of the application, and first up I'm going to enter in any languages that are spoken at my service locations. So I'm going to hit Create New, and there's just going to be one drop-down list in order to satisfy this requirement, and I'm simply going to drop that list down and select the language. I'm going to select English first, but at my service location we also speak French, so I'm just going to repeat that process, and this time in my drop-down list I am going to select French. If you hold any certifications, you can report those here. However, this field is not required. You would just want to give us the specialty the certification is associated to, the certificate type, number, and the effective and end dates. Just below that, you do have the option to provide a website if you have one that you want to report on the provider directory for members. You just want to make sure that if you do enter a URL here, that it starts with HTTP or HTTPS in order for it to be a valid URL. You will be required to enter in malpractice information, so I'm going to do so by hitting Create New in the malpractice information window. I need to select my type of carrier by choosing from the drop-down list. Enter in the name of my carrier, my policy number, and the aggregate and per occurrence amount. And you'll notice that I didn't enter in any dollar signs or periods or commas in those amounts, and that's because the module does not accept special characters in these fields. So you want to make sure to stick to digits only. And lastly, I need to enter in the effective and end dates of my policy. Directly under that, we are going to ask you if you have in the last 10 years been involved in a malpractice suit or claim. If your answer to this question is yes, a window is going to populate and you will be required to give us the patient name, policy number, and your status in that case or claim. If your answer is no, you have satisfied the requirement for that question. Once you've entered in all necessary information on the other page, you can hit Save to continue. Next, we're going to ask you if you wish to be enrolled in EFT or electronic funds transfer. This means that your payments from Vermont Medicaid would be direct deposited into your account versus having a paper check mailed to you. So it's going to default the first question to no, that you do not wish to be enrolled in EFT. And if that is your answer, you can leave it as no, and you are all done with this page. You can simply hit Save to continue. But if you do wish to be enrolled in EFT, you're going to check the Yes button, and that's going to open up the rest of the page for you. At the top of the page, you're going to see that we've filled in some of the information already for you. Under provider information is going to be your name and address. And then we've also entered in your tax ID, your provider type, and your taxonomy, as well as your license information. Directly under that, there's going to be 4 areas that you can choose to enter in information, but it is not required, which is why they are not expanded. That's provider contact information, agent, federal agency, and retail pharmacy information. If you've got information to report under that category, you can simply click the plus sign, which will open up the window, and you can enter in the information. What will be required and is expanded is the financial institution information. So you will need to give us the name of your financial institution. We do not require that you enter in the address of that institution, but you can do so if you would like. We do need you to select from the drop-down whether it is a checking or a savings account. Provide us with the account number and the routing number. Directly under that, you can toggle between your tax ID or NPI. However, you are a typical provider, therefore there is nothing to associate for your NPI. You're going to want to leave it as tax ID number. And then the last section is the submission field at the bottom of the page. You're going to want to first drop down the box Include with Enrollment Submission and choose whether you're going to send us in a voided check or a bank letter. One of these is required with your EFT enrollment. So I'm going to check voided check for today. I don't have anything to add right here, but under the attachments page of our application, this is where that requirement is going to come into play. Then we need an electronic signature of whoever in your organization has the authority to do so. So that electronic signature via name would want to go here. And then lastly is the effective date that you wish to have your electronic funds transfer. Once you've entered in all necessary information, you can hit Save to continue. The next page of our application is the Disclosures page. And first, it is important that you read over the Privacy Act notice statement, as well as the ownership and controlling interest section and disclosure forms. Every provider is required to self-disclose, and then there's also 4 other disclosure types that need to be actioned in order for you to be able to continue. So down at the bottom, you're going to see the 5 disclosure types. All of the statuses are in new status, and we need them to say completed in order to be able to continue. So in order to do that, we have to action the line item by clicking the Create New button on that item. So we're starting with our provider self-disclosure. Once I hit Create New, it's going to bring up that disclosure form. You'll see at the top of the disclosure form, it brings over my name, my social security number, and my birth date. Under that is going to be a series of questions. They are all defaulted to yes. It's very important that you read over each question in order to answer it appropriately. You'll notice that because the answer of yes is on each question, there is a box located directly below the question. If your answer to the question is yes, you will be required to provide more information in that box as to why you answered yes on that specific question. If your answer is no, the box is going to go away and you can move on to the next question. I'm going to go through and answer these questions as you do the same. About in the middle of the page, we're going to ask you for a couple different contacts for a couple different reasons. The first one is contact information in case of an audit. So in the event of an audit, who do you want us to reach out to? So you will be required to provide a name and an address for that contact. And I'm going to tab through the zip code and let it go through that USPS software. I'm going to accept the changes by clicking on the line item. And then I also need to provide a phone type and phone number for that same contact information. And then under that, we're asking you for another address, and this address is the physical location of where your records are kept. And there's going to be a note on here that you can't enter a PO box, and that is because we do not expect that your records are being kept at the post office. So this does need to be a physical location. So again, I'm going to enter in the address and tab through that zip code, accept the changes. And then I also have to provide a phone type and phone number for medical records requests. Under that, there'll be a few more questions for you to answer, so you want to read them over carefully and answer them appropriately. Once you get to the bottom and you've entered in all information and reviewed and answered each question, you can hit save. And now I've satisfied the requirement for the provider self-disclosure. You'll see that my status now says completed and my create new box is grayed out, and that's because you can only have one self-disclosure. I need to do the same and action each one of these other disclosure forms. Regardless if I have a disclosing entity to report in the category or not, I still have to note that. So we're going to start with subcontractor disclosure first. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to hit create new on the line item, and that's going to bring me up a subcontractor disclosure form. At the top of the form, it's going to give you some information on what meets the criteria for somebody to have to disclose this information. So for instance, for a subcontractor, we're saying that in the preceding 12-month period, has the individual or entity had any business transactions totaling more than $25,000? If that does not apply to you, the first question of this form asks that. So if your answer is no, all of the other information is going to go away and you can hit save. If your answer is yes, you're going to want to answer the rest of the information. You're going to provide if it's an individual or a corporation, you can toggle between the two, and you would just answer the information accordingly. For a subcontractor, I don't have any. I'm going to hit no, and I'm going to then hit save. That has now met the requirement for the subcontractor disclosure, and it's now in a completed status. I'm going to move on to ownership and control interest. So again, same idea. I'm going to hit create new on that line item to open up an ownership and control interest disclosure form. And again, at the top of the form, it's going to describe what we mean by ownership and control interests so that you can answer this first question accordingly. Is there an entity, whether it's an individual or corporation, with an ownership or control interest in the disclosing entity as described above? If your answer is no, everything is going to collapse and you can hit save. But if your answer is yes, you're going to need to fill out the information. I am going to fill out this information because I have an individual who has 50% interest in my provider. So I'm going to enter in their name, their social security number, birth date, and then I will need to provide an address for this individual. I'll let it go through the USPS software to validate, accept the changes. And we are going to require here that you enter in an email address for this individual. This is an actual field for email that is required. You're going to need to give us an effective date of when this individual has controlling interest. And then we're going to default the end date for you to 12/31/9999. And that's because we expect that you probably don't have an end date for this individual or entity right now. But if you do, by all means, you can take this out and you can enter in the applicable end date. Then below that, just like we did with our provider self-disclosure, there's going to be questions that you're going to need to answer regarding this individual or entity. So you're going to want to read over each question very carefully. Again, they are defaulted to yes, and if your answer is yes, there will be more information that you're going to need to fill out. So I'm going to go ahead and go through these questions and answer accordingly. And you may be wondering why we do ask for all of this information for ownerships or managing employees, subcontractors, and so on. And that is because with your enrollment in Vermont Medicaid, all of your disclosing entities need to be screened as well before approval into the network. So that is why we're asking for this information. Once you've answered all the questions, you can hit save. And now not only have I entered the ownership and control interest form, but I've also satisfied the requirement for this entry. Now you'll notice that even though I completed a form, I still have the option to create new again. And that's because for any of the disclosure types other than self-disclosure, you may have multiple disclosing entities to report. You may have more than one ownership that meets the criteria. You may have more than one subcontractor. And in that case, you want to report each one of those that meets the criteria. So once you've completed one, you would hit create new again. It will bring you up a blank form and you can fill it out and move on. So I'm going to go under managing employees next. I'll hit create new. Same idea. I'm going to read over the information at the top to see if I have anybody that meets the criteria under new managing employees. If my answer is yes, I will leave it as yes and enter in all the necessary information. If my answer is no, that information is removed and I can hit save. And then lastly, we're going to action the business transaction. So I'm going to hit create new again. Read over the information at the top to see if I have anyone that meets that criteria. I'm going to answer the first question. Yes will leave me to have to fill out the information here. If my answer is no, I can save and move on. Now my statuses are all complete, so I am ready to move on. I do just want to note that if you have information that needs to be reviewed, so maybe somebody needs to look it over before you submit the application, you can go back and review the disclosure forms that you have completed by simply clicking anywhere on the line item for that form. So for instance, if I wanted to go back and review my provider self-disclosure form, I can click anywhere here in this white area, and that's going to bring up the self-disclosure form that I filled out with all of the information. I can see my disclosure form is listed here, and I would simply hit the edit button. It would bring that form up and I would be able to review or edit the information. Once you've entered in all necessary information regarding your disclosing entities that meet criteria, you can hit save to continue. We are now on to the attachments page of the application, and this is where you are going to be providing supporting documentation. You'll see in the first window under required attachments, it's going to list the attachment types that you are going to need to complete your application. So in my case, I need to include a copy of my professional license, my malpractice, and a copy of a voided check or a signed letter from the bank because I chose to enroll in EFT. Right now, all the requirements are no, and we need them to say yes in order to be able to continue. Now, your attachment types may be different than what you see here, and that's okay. It's just dependent upon, again, the enrollment type and the provider type that you chose. So it may be different. You just want to make sure that you're actioning your attachment types as is listed on your application. So in order for us to action these, what we're going to do is we're going to first hit Create New in the Attachment Details window in the bottom. This is going to bring up a window, and we're first going to select our transmission method. How are you going to get this attachment to the application? Now, if you drop the box down here, there's a number of different options that you have. And just like I have been saying throughout the application, I highly recommend that you choose electronic, meaning that you have your attachments saved to your computer and you're going to attach them right here onto the application. The reason for this is if you do that, when you submit your application, it's automatically going to go start the screening process. If you choose to send us your documents after you've submitted your application by mail, email, or fax, your application is going to go into a holding status, and it's not going to start the process until we receive those attachments from you. And they do have a time limit on them. So if you are going to choose one of those other methods, just be aware you want to get us those documents as soon as possible. So I'm going to choose electronic only for today. And then I have to select my attachment type. And I'm selecting the attachment type based upon what I'm seeing here at the top under required attachments. So I'm going to start with my professional license, and I can do a predictive search. So I'm just going to type that into the box here so I don't have to scroll through all of the types. I'm going to select professional license, and then I'm going to hit select files in order to get the attachment from my computer. I'm going to choose my file, hit open, and then just that fast, that document is now uploaded and I can hit save. So now you'll see under attachment details, I have selected to transmit my document electronically for my attachment type of professional license, and here is the file. If I look back up at the top, now the requirement met column has been changed to yes for my professional license. So I'm going to do the same thing for my proof of professional liability insurance. Under attachment details, I'm going to hit create new. I'm going to select my transmission method again. My attachment type this time is proof of professional liability insurance. And I'm going to select the file off of my computer to upload. I'm going to hit save. And then lastly, I'm going to do the same for my copy of a voided check. I'm going to hit create new. And you'll see that if you are prepared ahead of time, going back to that welcome page that we saw at the beginning that had the enrollment pre-checklist, if you're prepared with what you're going to need, it goes very quickly. It's very easy to select the files, attach them to the application, and be able to submit it. So definitely take a look at that enrollment pre-checklist from the beginning. All right, I'm going to save my last one. And now I've got all of my documents listed here and all my requirements are yes. So I am ready to move on to the next page. I do just want to make a note here that having requirement met say yes does not necessarily mean that you have uploaded the document to your application. It just means that you have told us how you're going to send them. So if down here yours says by mail, email, or fax, these are still going to say yes, but you are going to want to make sure to send us those documents as soon as possible after you submit your application. And there will be a cover sheet at the end that I will show you that you're going to want to submit with your documents. So once you are ready and all of your requirements have been met, you can hit save to continue. We've now made it to the last page of the application, which is our agreement and submit page. At the top of the page, you're going to want to read over the information carefully. Under the terms of agreement, you're going to see that it has pulled over some information from earlier on in the application. It's always good practice to review that information, make sure everything is correct, because if something is wrong, now is a good time to go back and fix it. For certain provider types, there are special provisions. So you're going to want to make sure to look over all information very carefully. So you're going to want to read the information down here at the bottom. And when you are ready and agree, you can hit proceed. The next thing that's going to populate is our general provider agreement. It's very important that you read over this agreement carefully because these are the terms that you are agreeing to with Vermont Medicaid. You do have the option to save or print this document if you need to review it further or just to keep a copy for your records. When you've reviewed the information and agree to the terms, you're going to check the I accept box that's located in the bottom right-hand corner. That's going to populate a blue window asking you to confirm that yes, you do accept. Directly under that, we are going to ask you for some information in order to receive an invitation code for the provider portal upon the approval of your enrollment. So we want to know who should get that invitation code to have direct access to your enrollment data. So you're going to fill out the information completely. And again, upon the approval of your application, an invitation code will go out to this individual automatically. And once registered with that invitation code, it will give them direct access to the information in this enrollment record. So just be aware that that is the case here. And you want to make sure to key in the information very carefully because when this individual does fill out their registration with that invitation code, all the data that they are answering has to match what you have entered in here. Lastly, at the bottom, you need to sign your application, and you're going to do so electronically. So to do that, you're going to first check the I accept box, enter in your last name and your first name. If you wanted to provide some more information to Gainwell or the state of Vermont, you can enter in comments here. And then if you are ready to submit your application, we're going to enter in a verification email ID in order to get a verification code to submit it. But you do have the option to click the Finish Later button if you're not ready to submit your application. Maybe you need to have somebody else review it before you send it, or you need to verify a piece of information. And if that's the case, you can hit Finish Later. It will save all of your data up to right now, and you can resume your application for up to 30 days. If 30 days goes by and you have not submitted your application, that application will be locked out and you would need to start over. We are ready to submit the application today, so I'm going to go ahead and enter in an email address to get that verification code. So I've entered in the email here, and then I'm going to click Request Verification Code. And it's going to let me know in this blue box here that the code is going to expire after 10 minutes. So if for whatever reason you are not able to get to that email within 10 minutes and it does expire, all you would want to do is leave this application and then come back and resume it, and then you'd be able to request another verification code. I have received my verification code, came through my email, so I have copied it and I'm just going to paste it into this field. That's the easiest way to make sure that it's being entered correctly, and I do want to note that how you see it in your email is how you need to put it into the verification code field. So all of my letters were capitalized, which means I need to make sure that they're all capitalized in that field. So now that we have our verification code, we are ready to submit our application. I'm going to go ahead and do so by hitting the Submit button on the bottom right-hand side. And then it's going to ask me to verify that I'm ready to submit the application, so I'm going to hit Yes. And now we have successfully submitted an atypical new enrollment in the provider management module. You're going to notice here your tracking number, and there is some contact information for the provider enrollment team if you need to contact us for any reason. Here is that cover sheet that I was talking about with the attachments page. So if you have selected to get us your attachments by mail, email, or fax, you're going to want to send those in with this cover sheet. This cover sheet gives information about which application to attach those documents to. It makes it much easier when we receive them to be able to upload them to the application. A couple other things to note before we close out. If you do need to check the enrollment status of your application, you can do so by clicking Menu, hover over Provider Enrollment, and check enrollment status. You're going to need your ATN or your application tracking number, as well as the password you use to register the application. If you needed to leave the application, you weren't ready to submit it, and you need to resume it, you can do so. Right above that is the Resume Revalidate Enrollment. Again, you're just going to select it, use your ATN and password in order to go back into that application, and it's going to bring you exactly where you left off. Thank you so much for visiting this training today. I hope you have a wonderful day.